Hi, my name is Ophi YouTube Videos. I am a feminist and a lesbian, and I make conversational commentary videos about both of those things. I made a video earlier this month going over every abortion access question on the ballot this year in the United States, because our election is in less than 2 weeks, and that is terrifying to me, so I am making lots of videos about it. Back to regularly scheduled and less overtly political nuance soon. I just need to channel all of this into something, or else I will start running up my walls. When I was working on my other recent electoral video, so there's been a few, but the other one where I was wearing the same outfit, the one about the fair wage increase in Massachusetts, I decided to go ahead and show a political ad in the middle of the video. I'm sorry, because if you don't watch me with ad blocker, you probably already have gotten a lot of political ads in the middle of my videos. But that I showed what people are running to try to get people to vote against a specific ballot measure while I was talking about the people who are running it. And then I remembered about what I learned in that weekend that I documented, where I was learning as much as I could about abortion. In Florida, a political ad had been taken off the airwaves, and a TV station was threatened with a lawsuit over it. The judge made a common sense ruling, thank God, and I wanted to talk about that, and I realized we could just watch this ad together. This ad that Ron DeSantis is so terrified of, that has the Republicans running scared, and we could talk about it. And that's what we're going to do in this video. This ad, which again, the governor of the state has sent threats over, is called Caroline, and it features a young woman telling her story. I'm going to play it now, and you can also find it linked in the description below.
When I saw the tumor on the MRI, my first thought was, am I going to be able to see my daughter again? The doctors knew if I did not end my pregnancy, I would lose my baby, I would lose my life, and my daughter would lose her mom. Florida has now banned abortion, even in cases like mine. Amendment 4 is going to protect women like me. We have to vote yes.
I wanted to understand the way that the other side looks at this, even though I know that I'm just fundamentally never going to put my feet into the shoes of someone who is pro-forced birth and have any actual agreement with them, but, it's still worth trying. Wouldn't that have been an amazing segue into a sponsorship with Ground News or something? But I'm not sponsored yet. I'm kind of sponsored by my Patreon supporters. I'll talk more about that towards the end of the video. But rather than seeking out explicitly pro-forced birth propaganda, I started instead with a video from Straight Arrow News on YouTube, which I'm not familiar with, but that tries to explain itself as being unbiased. I got conservative vibes from the title of the video, but I googled them, and according to allsides.com, they have a pretty centrist rating. They are 0.17 on their scale, where -6 is far left and regular 6 is far right. So, okay. It was the title of the video that made me think it was conservative, though. The accusation in the title that the abortion ads being challenged were misleading, and after watching it, I'm still not convinced that this was scripted by somebody who truly understands the urgency of abortion, but I want to take you through some of their coverage of this back and forth that went down between some of the TV stations and the State Department, because somebody already read all of this out loud anyway.
In a cease and desist letter from the health department to the NBC affiliate in Tampa, Florida officials say the advertisement is not only false, it is dangerous. Women faced with pregnancy complications posing a serious risk of death or physical impairment may and should seek medical treatment in Florida. They cite the state's Heartbeat Protection Act. After 6 weeks, an abortion may be performed if 2 physicians certify in writing that in reasonable medical judgment, the termination of the pregnancy is necessary to save the pregnant woman's life or avert a serious risk of substantial and irreversible physical impairment of a major bodily function of the pregnant woman other than a psychological condition. The 2-physician requirement is waived in the case of an emergency medical procedure.
And this one was made before the judge responded, so we will follow up on how the judge responded. But she describes another case of a threat made against a different ad beside the one that we already watched.
In Florida, if Amendment 4 passes, it will loosen abortion restrictions in the state. The Yes on 4 campaign has come under fire for its political ads. Another ad was fact-checked by a local NBC station in Orlando, finding it false.
An extreme ban with no real exceptions. Not for her health, not even for rape. A ban where government decides, not you. And that's why Florida must vote yes on 4 to stop the dangerous ban, not even for rape.
Florida law does list an exception for rape, incest, or human trafficking up to 15 weeks of pregnancy.
Though Florida's governor is fighting to have Yes on 4's ad spot removed from television, the campaign is pushing back, sending a letter to the TV station telling them to keep it on the airwaves. Saying, first and most importantly, this letter raises serious First Amendment concerns. Indeed, it reflects an unconstitutional attempt to coerce the station into censoring protected speech. Second, the advertisement is true. The letter provides no evidence to the contrary. The advertisement must continue to air on your station. The state acknowledges the First Amendment protections for political ads, but argues the threat to human life supersedes it, saying while your company enjoys the right to broadcast political advertisements under the First Amendment of the United States Constitution and Article 1, Section 4 of the Florida Constitution, that right does not include free rein to disseminate false advertisements, which, if believed, would likely have a detrimental effect on the lives and health of pregnant women in Florida.
I talked about this in my other abortion video, but when these exceptions do exist, they are extremely rarely ever actually granted by healthcare providers. I very much agree with the notion that an exception for something like rape or for medical reasons is very much only PR for the bills to make them seem less cruel. These abortion bans are not any less cruel in practice, though, not when patients are bleeding out in the parking lot as a result of them. But what did that federal judge say about all of this? He said, "It's the First Amendment, stupid." Reading from CNN here, the judge granted a temporary restraining order against Florida's Surgeon General after the state health department threatened to bring criminal charges against broadcasters airing the ad. The state health department, part of Governor Ron DeSantis' administration, which has aggressively campaigned against the pro-abortion amendment, said the ad's claims are false and dangerous to the public health. That's what was being cited in those cease and desist letters, which were effective at getting at least one station that it was issued to pull the ad. However, the judge ordered that the health department's threats were viewpoint discrimination and in violation of the First Amendment. Free speech, if any non-Americans are still watching but don't have our amendments memorized, because I sure wouldn't. The lawyer who sent these cease and desists, by the way, had a crisis of conscience, I guess, and resigned less than a week before the judge would pass down the ruling that these threats couldn't be acted on and bars the department from intimidating local stations. Though, for some reason, it looks like this is only effective until October 29th. I'm still with CNN here, but I'm almost done reading. The state's health department continues to assert that the abortion rights ad is unequivocally false and detrimental to public health in Florida. Jay Williams, the department's communication major, told CNN on Thursday that the media continues to ignore the truth, that Florida's heartbeat protection law always protects the life of a mother and includes exceptions for victims of rape, incest, and human trafficking. Okay, Jesus Christ, like I said, nobody is actually getting exceptions approved in these states. It is horrible. It's horrific. All of this is so horrific. And this bullying of the TV stations isn't even the end of Ron and company's hatreds of this abortion bill. Let's talk about this other temper tantrum before I remind you to vote and we wrap up, huh? 2 videos in one day was ambitious for me. We're going to ignore the continuity change here. So I read an article that just came out in the New York Times about what they're describing as Ron DeSantis going on the offensive against Amendment 4 in Florida. Joey, that's a little rude for right now. Well, you don't have to leave. Something to know about Ron DeSantis, I think, because I feel like it got a little bit memory hold. We all kind of forgot the Republican primary as soon as it was over. Both times around, really, with Donald Trump. Oh God, it's been 3, huh? I guess there wasn't a primary the second time, though. But anyway, the thing that I think got kind of memory hold immediately following his presidential run is that people thought that he was an actual contender for that he might take the candidacy away from Trump, which clearly he did not. And the other thing to know is that the Florida heartbeat abortion ban bill is kind of just part of the branding for this man. Because Ron DeSantis is an evil, evil man. He's the governor of Florida, and he's not eligible to be unseated until 2027, which unfortunately means, unlike, at least we have some chance of getting rid of Ted Cruz because his Senate seat is up in Texas, but we gotta wait longer for any relief from DeSantis. Though, if you need encouragement to vote, it would be really good in undoing some of his branding and his sort of legacy if that ban that he signed did end up going away and being overridden by the will of the voters. I'll probably regret saying this if I'm proven wrong, and I may be proven wrong. I don't think that the man has enough branding for a presidential run, but I also very loudly thought that Trump would never win back in 2015 and 2016, so who am I? The Florida abortion ban heartbeat bill is a devastating, horrific, and murderous thing with horrible consequences for mothers, families, and children in Florida. It also mostly exists because it was a bargaining chip that Ron DeSantis was attempting to use to leverage into endearing himself with the crazies across the country who really liked the idea of an abortion ban that was that barbaric. And though his national campaign has ended, Ron DeSantis is still campaigning, even though it is so far from being an election year for him, because he is campaigning against Amendment 4. He's holding official events, trying to force other Republicans in the state into coming out just as forcefully against this amendment as he is. And I already went over in my first video about abortion when I was talking about this amendment that he had an entire advisory board create this letter saying that the whole amendment hadn't actually been above board, even though they've certified all those signatures all the way back in February. And it's a whole big mess, and it's just very clear that he is very scared of the fact that this amendment very well might pass. More information about that in that video. It's a bit of a digression, and we're already talking about enough in this one. But area Democrats agree that that was just an attempt to frighten and mislead voters in the days before the election. From the New York Times here also about how hard DeSantis has been trying to kneecap this amendment. A Republican-controlled state panel added a financial statement beneath the question on the November ballot, warning that it could result in high litigation costs and reduced revenues because it would result in fewer live births in the state. Amendment 4 organizers said the statement was biased and speculative. The article also goes over outreach with evangelicals, Catholics, and other religious groups, all supported by members of DeSantis' staff, asking them, essentially, it says, to preach from behind the pulpit and tell people how to vote, which is something that is not supposed to happen. I could be wrong. I should have looked this part up before I started recording, but I didn't. But I've always been under the impression that though churches do often tell their congregation how to vote, to do so is to risk losing your status as not having to pay taxes. So I don't know if that's still true. We have been pretty far into our electric slide into full-on theocracy over here, so that probably never ever gets enforced, huh? But the article also says, this week, Mr. DeSantis crisscrossed the state with anti-abortion doctors, holding campaign-style events at the state's expense. At one event in Coral Gables, an affluent suburb of Miami, the political blurred with the religious. After one doctor said his stance against Amendment 4 was not religious, Jeanette M. Nunes, the lieutenant governor, said hers was. We cannot go to church and pray like Christians and turn around and vote like atheists, she says. I plan, personally, on voting like an atheist. Like an atheist who believes in the separation of church and state. I really come up short trying to understand these freaks here, because surely if it's against your religion for you to get an abortion, you can just not get an abortion? I was pretty baffled by that in a recent interview that Kamala Harris did as well. The interviewer was asking her what kind of concessions she might make on abortion, and her answer, I think, actually was pretty good. It was like, no, we shouldn't be making any concessions. But the concession that the interviewer had thrown out as an example was like, for religious exemptions. And that drives me up the wall, because your religious exemption is that you have a religion and it made you decide not to do something. You don't have the country's religion. We're not supposed to be a Christian country. And then, like, I guess, you know, I know we all overwrite that and pretend like the separation of church and state was never a thing. Or if you're raised the way I was raised, I remember distinctly when I asked my mother what separation of church and state was, she was like, it is specifically so that the state can't tell the church what to do. And I never learned about the other part of it for a very long time. But, like, other people shouldn't need to prove that they're not the religion of the majority in order to access healthcare. You should just make your own decisions and not try to legislate what other decisions people get to make. Again, I've already said this on this channel before, I am pretty radical about abortion. I don't even think that it's an extremely radical take to be baffled by the fact that other people have such strong opinions on it. I think pretty much everyone, once they slide into their pro-choice era, are like, wait a minute, why does everyone care so much? Another thing to know, and why I'm keeping such a close eye on this one, Florida is the most populous of the 10 states that get to vote on abortion this year, and it currently has one of the harshest bans in effect. The abortion ballot stands to affect a lot of people, though I'm not sure how many of them are viewers here in the Nuance Corner. If this is on your ballot, if you are eligible to vote for abortion here or anywhere else, please vote yes. Even if you never want to get an abortion, even if your religion is opposed to it, I know I'm pretty much at this point only speaking to people who already agree with me. You're somebody who clicked on a video by a feminist lesbian about an abortion ban. I think you knew what you were getting into, and I know, and I appreciate that, and I really love you, and I think that's really cool that you wanted to watch a video like this. Thank you. I think early voting already did begin in Florida, and this amendment needs a 60% majority to pass, and then after it does pass, it surely will be fought after the fact by Republicans. It's extremely, extremely important that this ballot pass and that the fight continue and not have to start from nothing over again. I have one more thing that I would like to cover in this video, and I have extremely mixed feelings on the use of the traumatic stories of women to prove the point of the cruelty of abortion bans. I think it's unfair, and I also worry, as I went over in my first abortion video, that it sort of unwittingly stigmatizes people who need to have abortions for reasons that are more mundane or garden variety, reasons that don't have traumatic and extreme extenuating circumstances. So I always want to make the point clear when I'm even referencing stories like that I am unquestioningly pro-abortion. I in no way require any sort of tragic backstory or extraordinary circumstances in order to believe that somebody should be able to access an abortion. I think they should just be able to get an abortion. But even with tragic backstories and extraordinary circumstances, people still find themselves unable to access abortion. Tessa Stewart, a journalist for the Rolling Stone, somebody we have read from before on this channel and certainly will read from again in the future. I think she's great. And she interviewed a couple of people who have been featured in those Yes on 4 ads in Florida, Deborah and Lee Dorbert. I want to speak a little bit about their story. These kinds of stories are extremely important, and also them being shared historically does impact the accessibility of abortion. This kind of story, I think, makes certain types of people more empathetic. Yeah? I think, again, if you're watching this, you're already pretty empathetic to abortion, and I do think you should read the full interview if you feel up to it, but it is a very hard read. It is really emotional and difficult and upsetting. So I also want to give you a trigger warning. We're about to get into some specifics about child loss and of that specific trauma before we move into the final section. You can check the timestamps if just general abortion discussion isn't too heavy for you, but this is. That's totally okay.
I remember the doctor handing me a baby boy that was blue, and I just held him because he was so cold. Due to the abortion ban, I was being forced to carry the baby from 23 weeks all the way to 37 weeks, and knowing that my son was going to die.
Having to watch your wife be in pain and continue to tell her to keep going, that everything's gonna be okay, knowing it's not. That was the hardest thing.
Government had no right to do that to my family. This ban is torture.
Okay, I cried the first time that I read this interview, and I thought that I may be able to read more of it without crying, and then I cried a little bit, and nobody wants to watch me cry. So I'm going to be brief covering this. You saw a lot of it already in that brief ad that is running in Florida, and I am struck by this every single time that I see something advocating in favor of abortion legislation where somebody was brave enough to share their story. Just exactly, again, just how brave that is, what risks people are taking with their vulnerability, putting their face out there, telling their story like that about something that is so sensitive and so vulnerable. It's really, really strong, and it's a really brave and selfless thing to do because it's an act in service of other people who are suffering from the same or similar fates. Just the headline of this article from Tessa Stewart really gives a lot of the details. Doctors agreed her baby would die 3 months before she was forced to give birth. Deborah wanted this child. Like many women who receive abortions, she was married and already had one child. This was a child who was going to be a younger sibling, a very wanted baby. It was during a routine ultrasound that they discovered that the baby's kidneys were not developing. Deborah was sort of given options on how to proceed. That is, she was told what the actual options are, and then also told that she needed to hang in there and wait to hear back from legal. Roe had only recently fallen. Offices did not have standard protocol. I imagine many of them still leave people in limbo while decisions are made by people further up the chain than their original doctor. When the decision finally was passed down to Deborah, she was told that she was not allowed to induce before viability. That is considered an abortion. She was in pain, required to remain pregnant for several more weeks, for 3 months. Just to eventually give birth to a baby who she had already been told would not survive and who lived for 94 minutes. Deborah talks about her experience being pregnant, and especially being far enough along to be very visibly pregnant and having to deal with people congratulating her in public. Oh, is this your first or second baby? Are you excited? And her saying no. And the way that the interactions would sour when people thought that they were being friendly. There's an argument that gets made somewhere in pro-forced birth circles where they think that it is some kind of kindness to the child to allow it to be born, to have a short and painful 90-minute life. And they forget the enormous cruelty that that is to the parents. And this is one specific story, but it is something that is happening in all of these states with these bans. Again, like many people who need abortions are already parents, Deborah also is a parent who needs an abortion, and for whom it was not financially sustainable for her to travel to another state. Even without states outright enforcing these threats that are being made about prosecuting people for crossing state lines to receive abortive care, it's still not always possible for somebody to leave the state that they are in and go stay somewhere else. And as if all of that wasn't enough, on top of it, after everything, they were saddled with a $40,000 bill for the privilege of being forced to birth a baby who was never going to survive. It's an injustice. It is an inhumanity. There are so many stories that have been coming out, that come out, and that have come out before we had Roe versus Wade as a ruling. Honestly, stories that came out even while Roe versus Wade was the law of the land, where states did make abortive care incredibly hard to access, even when it was technically legal. There are a lot of really heartbreaking and horrifying stories. There are a lot of stories where the mother did not get to survive the way that Deborah did. Stories where the mother was in fact going to die without an abortion and was still not given a medical exception. Again, I am not going to just sit here and cry on camera, But I'm also not going to retake that because this is important and I want you to know that it is important to me and that that's why I spend my time talking about it. The wall sign is a little bit of a joke and it's also really not. I think I'm going to do at least one more abortion video before Election Day rolls around. I'm going to try to work on that this weekend. I'm filming this on Friday night, and I'm hoping to Pokemon Go to the polls tomorrow. I said it already. I'll say it again. If you have an option to vote for abortion this year, please vote for abortion. If you're in Nebraska specifically, look at both options because you have an option to expand and an option to restrict, and you do not want to restrict. But everywhere else that you have an option to vote on abortion, please vote for abortion. And more generally, as I have always advocated for in all of my videos where I speak on voting, please vote for Kamala Harris because she is the candidate who has a chance to win, and she is the candidate who is campaigning on reproductive rights. In order to make good on that promise, she's going to need a majority. And I know this is one of the most electoral-brained things that I will ever say on this channel, but if everybody thinks that their state could never become a swing state, no state will ever swing again. The Republicans will gerrymander everything to shit even more than they already have. Please go vote. Go vote blue this time. Vote green in your local stuff if you want to. I made a whole video about why I don't think that Jill Stein is the right vote, and I still maintain that. But try to get Democrats in wherever you can, and try to get Republicans out wherever you can. Vote to protect, restore, and expand reproductive freedom anywhere that you can. And vote for people like Deborah. Vote for people who didn't make it through. Thank you very, very much to my lovely patrons for supporting me and my work. You can see the names of a couple of them on screen right now. If you're interested in supporting me financially or in getting a couple of extra videos from me a month, I do have a Patreon. I also have like a coffee where you can do a one-time donation if you feel so inclined. Thank you so much to everybody who has supported me on Patreon, through coffee, through just watching my videos all the way through to the end. It really means a lot to me. I really appreciate it. Thanks for hanging out with me, and I'll see you again soon. Bye.